I'd like to thank the organizers of this event for inviting me over here. I used to live in Virginia area, now I'm in Houston. And I'm so happy to come back and visit some of my friends, old friends. I realized that I missed this area. Of course, having storms, humid weather in Houston makes me miss California, where I lived before coming to Virginia, and of course, France has a role in that. We have talked about egalitarian gender ideology, sharing household chores, and gender roles in the family. And my topic is related to these topics, previous topics, by asking whether Muslim world developed such notions or not. So it's about the current, present Muslim world and the history of Muslim world, the history of Islam. Therefore, my talk will be a supplement to the previous presenters. My paper is a critique of Western scholarship's perspective of Muslim women, and it has a very crucial relationship with today's topic, which is family, and I'll come to that point later, very soon. The status of women in Islam has been ideologically central to any discussion between the West and Muslims. This has been since 1800s, mid-1800s. Western scholarship, I'm talking about the early Orientalists, modernists, and some feminists as well, has criticized Muslim women of being pacified under the yoke of Islamic clerics and accepted roles of quote-unquote good moms, obeying wives, which was imposed on them by the patriarchal system of Islam. This is what Western scholarship has taught since mid-1800s. As opposed to this, we have Muslim feminists who endeavored to prove that Muslim women, usually the Arab women, have been open-minded before and after Islam, but were subjected to traditional local value systems which had nothing to do with the core of Quranic revelation, which is Islam. What these two groups, meaning the Orientalists, modernists and Orientalists, and feminists, have done, what these two groups have done was really crucial to the development of the scholarship, and I admire that, the scholarship on Islam and the Middle East. Otherwise, we wouldn't know almost anything about Muslim countries until late 1950s. So it was what they have done. But as any social theory would have, they had some flaws specifically regarding the Muslim world. What I mean is scholarship that has conducted substantial surveys on the issue of what Muslim women have really thought in pre-modern and modern times is very rare. We don't have too many surveys, too many data on this topic. So this study, this paper, will be based on two separate surveys. One will be a historical survey, which is my field. I'm a historian. That aims to find the voices of silenced women by reconstructing their stories from various sources, such as the Ottoman court registers. Silenced it doesn't mean suppressed. It means we don't see their voices in the literature, in the history literature, too much, too often. The other survey is, the other one is the survey done by Gallup in contemporary modern Muslim societies to hear Muslim women, the voices of Muslim women of the modern times. This survey was conducted in 2006 and 2007, and it was published in a book by Dalia Mujahid and John Esposito. This dualist approach has an important goal, which is reconstructing what Muslim women have experienced in the past and what they think in the present. The Orientals' point of view is they condemned Islam for the so-called inferior status of Muslim women by predominantly relying on the memoirs of the 18th and 19th centuries European travelers who narrated the so-called male domination, patriarchal society, over the defenseless Muslim women. And early Western feminists, unfortunately, followed these arguments and crusaded against the alleged oppression of Muslim women. And Muslim feminists, such as Fatima Mernisi or Leila Ahmed, developed feminist conceptions of an ideal Muslim society in terms of gender relations. A common argument central to their works was the oppression of Muslim women in patriarchal Muslim society. They searched for the Muslim women's emancipation in Islam. So they thought Islam, or not Islam, but Muslim societies oppressed women. And they searched for the emancipation of Muslim women by working within the limits of Islamic theology. As they regarded Islam as the main instrument of gender definition in the Middle East, they believed that the first and most important step towards emancipating Muslim women was reforming Islam. They argued that the Islamic gender distinction was maintained by laws and customs that ensured women's status as subjugation. Therefore, they argued that the emancipation of women, Muslim women, could have only been realized if Muslim women renounced the belief that suggested their subjugation. So, my point here, which is related to today's topic, is these arguments, Orientalist and feminist arguments, Western arguments, if accurate, which I mean, if women in the Muslim world were oppressed, these arguments, if accurate, would be one of the greatest challenges against the notion of, challenges to the notion of having a good, spiritually nurturing Muslim family. So if we have women suppressed by their husbands or the lawmakers in the Muslim world, you won't have too many caring families or families nurtured by love. So you won't have those kinds of. The argument suggests that Muslim world didn't have too many families that lived a happy life. If you come from the argument of suppression of the women in the Muslim community. So the question is, are these arguments 100% accurate in the light of current data and historical facts? If not, why do we have such a perception? I'll start with the present day data. A recent, which is I mentioned, it's a 2006 and 7 survey, set of surveys conducted by Gallup in several Muslim countries defy the Orientalist and Muslim arguments. I'm not suggesting here that everything is and was perfect, because nobody is perfect. And yet, we will see in the court records that nothing was perfect in the history. But what I am suggesting here is women's status in Muslim community was not as it has been described by the above mentioned scholarship, by the Orientalist and feminist scholarship. First, why do we have such a misperception? According to the survey, which was published in Who Speaks for Islam by John Esposito and Dalia Mujahid, the data suggests that Muslim women have been portrayed in the West, in the Western media, as silent, submissive, and relegated to the domestic sphere, while men monopolized the active roles. For instance, in the American press, 73% of Muslim women were depicted in passive capacities. And for instance, in photographs from the Middle East, women were depicted as victims more than 6 times than men. So if you check the American press, then you will see Muslim women depicted as victims more than Muslim men, 6 times more than Muslim men. So it is, of course, as I always have media as the scapegoat. The scapegoat is the media, that informs most of the people, because we tend not to read too many books, scholarly books. We like reading novels and those kinds of things, and we get our information from usually from the media, specifically about overseas. Gallup findings show that Muslim women were hardly regarded as second-class citizens in Muslim countries. For instance, in Saudi Arabia, which has been argued to be the worst case in the Muslim world, women are not allowed to vote or drive. That's true. But they are not silent and submissive to them. 61% of women say that they should be able to drive in Saudi Arabia. 69% say that they should be able to vote without any influence. And 76% say that they should be able to work at any job which they are qualified for. Laws do discriminate, yes, but women are not submissive to the current laws. That was my original point. How about the Muslim men? What do they think about this women issue? For instance, about women's suffrage issue. Men think similarly on those issues. In Iran, for instance, 87% of men think that women should be allowed to vote. This is Iran. This is 58% in Saudi Arabia, and in Indonesia, Malaysia, Turkey, and Lebanon, there is no observable gap between men and women on this suffrage issue. That's why I put them 100%, because they no longer discuss this issue. It's done. The other data here is it's about the what men think about women. For instance, 62% of men in Saudi Arabia, 73% of men in Iran, and 81% of men in Indonesia think that women should be able to work in any job that fits to their qualifications. So it is the laws that discriminate. It's not the people, or it's not the religion or whatever they believe in that discriminates women. The next topic is education. Regarding the levels of post-secondary education among Muslim women, the situation is much more favorable. 52% of women in Iran, and I believe men would be 70%, not more than that. 32% in Saudi Arabia, 34% in Egypt, and 37% in Lebanon has post-secondary education, which is college and university level, which is a high percentage. Sorry. The countries with lowest rates are 8% Morocco and 13% Pakistan. And guess what? This is not unique to the Muslim world. Brazil, 4%, which is not a Muslim country, and Czech Republic is 11%, which is not Muslim either, and it's a European country. So it has nothing to do with Islam or what Muslims believe. Women's basic education is still way below the averages in some Muslim countries. For instance, in Yemen, literacy level is only 28% in women versus 70% in men. But this is not unique to the Muslim world, like this low percentage, because in Saudi Arabia, for instance, in Saudi Arabia and Iran, it is 70%, and in Malaysia and Jordan, the literacy level of women is 85%. Ironically, while Westerners still see the veil, like head cover, as a symbol of women's inferior status in the Muslim world, to some Muslim women, on the other hand, Western women lack modesty, which signaled their degraded cultural status in the Western world. So in both cases, in the Western case and in the Muslim case, the assumption is that women are either covering or uncovering to pleasure or obey men. These are from the data and the conclusions of data in the book by Esposito and Mujahid. Our next topic is secularism, which is separation of religion and state. It's a common argument that Muslim women were oppressed by the Islamic law. The question is, do Muslim women want to separate religion and state so that they would have more civilized rights than Islam gives them? According to a Washington Post survey in Iraq, after the Iraqi governing council placed family law under the Islamic legal doctrine, which is during Saddam's time, it was secular, but now they changed it into, they introduced a new law system which is more Islamic than Saddam's regime. So they asked questions to Iraqi women, and 58% of them opposed the separation of religion and state, and 81% said religious authorities should play a direct role in crafting family laws. So it's not something like women were oppressed in the Islamic world and they don't have their own ideas, and they don't, even though they have never supported such an Islamic law, they had to obey that. No, it's not. Even in modern times, modern Iraq, women believe that, 81% of women believe that religious authorities has to have a direct role in crafting family laws. How about equality? Have Muslim women been seeking for equality with men? According to the survey, they asked questions to several women. But there is one which is interesting. An Egyptian lady made the following statement. Gender equality is something analogous to giving a carpenter and a farmer both a hammer as a tool to their work, to do their works. So a farmer cannot do anything with a hammer if he wants to work on his field. So this is treating them equally, but not fairly. So they don't see equality a necessary thing to have. She doesn't see equality as a necessary thing to have in Egypt. So in conclusion to this part, I want to reiterate that this data does not mean that Muslim women don't have any problems. They have. And that they were treated equally. They were not treated equally. They have lots of problems waiting to be solved. But what I am suggesting is that Muslim women do not suffer in the current present day as it has been portrayed by the media and Orientalist and feminist scholarship. How about the history? How many minutes do I have? No? Okay. How about the history? Have Muslim women enjoyed this much of freedom in the history of Islam? In modern day, we have this freedom, yes. But have they enjoyed this much of freedom until today in the history? Of course, we cannot argue that medieval Muslim women were as free as modern women. We cannot argue that. But neither the men. Men were not equal in the medieval times. You would have elite people, governors, and peasants who cannot be anything other than being a peasant. And if they leave their farms, they would be punished. So that was the case. And this kind of a perception would be anachronism, which is judging history with today's values. We cannot do that. We have to have a certain perception, and we have to compare contemporary world with the Muslim world. So, as a historian, or as historians, if you want to reconstruct women's status in Muslim history, what we need to look at is whether women could represent themselves in the courts, argue their cases, go to the courts to get a divorce, and which is, according to the scholarship, they didn't have such a right, and engage in business. Do they have these rights? Have they had these rights, or haven't they? So this is the question. One good source for exploring this topic is the Ottoman court registers, which is Sharia Sicilleri. Any researcher could follow up divorce, or inheritance, or alimony and child support cases through these court registers, and the researchers can even find cases in which women rejected arranged marriages. If you tell this to an Orientalist, if you have told this to an Orientalist in 1950s, they wouldn't believe it. They wouldn't accept that. A woman they could reject an arranged marriage arranged by their parents by appealing to the court. And I have two cases. I'm going to go over them real quick. I have two cases, and court decided to annul the marriage. Even though it does not suggest that women had equal rights with men, it doesn't suggest that. But it defies the Eurocentric point of view that women were slaves, secondary citizens without any rights, and they were subjugated to the man in the Muslim world. Muslim societies were patriarchal, yes, as European societies in the history, and there is no doubt about it, but they were not as oppressive as it has been depicted by certain scholarship. Okay. This is the data that I have found in the court registers. It is about women going to the court for divorce. It's from Bursa, which is my hometown right now. My family lives there. And this data is from 1580s, I suppose. Yeah, it's from 1580s, 16th century. There are 152 cases, and these are the ways of divorce. Talaq and talaq with condition, men can do it only, and they don't have to go to the court about it. That is not equality. That's what I accept. Registered talaq and condition with talaq with condition, divorce by men, the condition is 52 and 5. Mukhala'a, which is women going to the court, is 93 for a divorce. And separation is just 2, which is, these are the percentages, 61% of the cases, of 152 cases, divorce cases, were initiated by women. Of course, this doesn't suggest that women wanted divorce more than men, because men didn't have to go to the court and register. But they would do it because they would do it mostly because they want to escape any further cases like alimony or child support. They would want a court statement registered in the court so that they would go clean home. They would go home clean. Okay. Here, I'll read a couple of cases from Rize province. I don't have them on the PowerPoint. In 1913, Hajar, a Muslim lady named girl, applied to the court to get a divorce from Mehmet. She claimed that it was an arranged marriage when she was a kid, and she did no longer want to consummate the marriage. They haven't been together, and she doesn't want to be. So she goes to the court, and the marriage was annulled by the local judge. And there's a similar case occurred in Petnos in 1914, which is a province of Rize, and the same decision came from the court. And polygyny is rare, having more than one wife. There are only 5 cases among men in Rize province. There are thousands of cases there, and it's very rare. And usually, if you check it, those men didn't leave any heirs. And obviously, they remarried because they thought they didn't have kids because their wives couldn't conceive. So that's the main reason. That was the main reason. And usually these cases are about inheritance. These cases that I have found about with regards to more than one wives. So there are alimony cases which suggest that women could go to the court and ask the judge to force her man or her ex-husband to pay alimony that she earned through marriage. So that is her money, and it has to be paid. And in 1914, for instance, Emine from Vanik, Rize, goes to the court for a divorce, and this is important. The reason was marital discord. They couldn't get along. That was the only reason. So women, if they couldn't get along, they were able to go to the court and get a divorce. So this is the last part. It's the conclusion. We can draw two important conclusions from the Ottoman court registers. The first one is the multiplicity of alimony, which is called nafaka, and child support cases. It is the second frequent case that women opened after inheritance cases. So there are lots of inheritance cases, and after that, this alimony and child support case comes. Which means women were often denied alimony and child support by their ex-husbands, even though they were entitled by law. So this is what the conditions or the characteristic of the population of the society in those days. Why do we have these cases? Because men used to deny alimony and child support, which is not good. It's not a good indication. So this suggests that there was no equality. But there is another conclusion. The second conclusion is that Muslim women were not subjugated to men, which means they had a gate to exit. They could go to the court and force their husbands for child support and alimony. They enjoyed much of the rights that men had, at least in theory, and were not equal. They were not equal, but they were not secondary citizens either. They had at least the right to go to the court to solve their issues. This means that they were at least provided a gate for exit if they hit trouble. Moreover, they were able to conduct businesses, go to courts suing their husbands, rejecting arranged marriages, claiming child support, which were quite recent developments in the modern Western societies. I'm talking about 16th century. In sum, Muslim women in the past and present had a possibility to have a happy, loving, and caring family.